A millionaire marries an obese woman as a bet and is surprised when... Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The story began on a rainy Friday night in New York City. Inside the marble lounge of the Horizon Club, a group of young billionaires gathered around a glass table, laughing over cigars and whiskey. Among them sat Lucas Grant, the youngest tech millionaire in the room, confident, reckless, and bored. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink, while his so-called friends taunted him. "Lucas," one of them said, "you have conquered every merger, every headline, every woman in this city. How about something you cannot win with money?" Lucas smirked. "There is nothing I cannot win with money." The man chuckled and tapped the ash from his cigar. "Then prove it. I bet you will not have the guts to marry her." He nodded toward the corner of the bar, where a woman in a plain gray dress was stacking trays after a catering shift. She was heavier than the models they dated, her hair tied back neatly, her face flushed with honest exhaustion. Laughter broke around the table. "Come on, man. You would not." Lucas's pride burned hotter than the liquor in his glass. He had built his empire on never backing down. His jaw tightened. "You think I would not? Fine. Watch me." The room went silent for half a second, then erupted in cheers. Phones came out to record his promise. Lucas raised his glass like a king sealing a deal. $100,000 says I can make her my wife within a month. Across the room, Clara Wells had no idea she had just become a part of a millionaire's game. She was finishing her shift, wiping tables, thinking only about her mother's hospital bill waiting back home in Brooklyn. Her feet ached, her paycheck was late again, and all she wanted was to make it through the week without another eviction notice. Later that night, as the rain poured outside, Lucas watched her leave the club. Something about her calm, steady steps through the storm stirred something unexpected in him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the thrill of doing the unthinkable. He told himself it was only a bet, nothing more. But the next day, he tracked down her workplace and approached her with an offer that sounded too strange to be real. "Miss Wells," he said, his voice smooth and confident, "I am Lucas Grant. I have a proposal for you." She blinked, confused. "A proposal?" "Yes," he replied, pulling a small envelope from his jacket. "I want you to marry me." The cafe went quiet. Clara froze, thinking it was a cruel joke. But when she saw the seriousness in his expression, her stomach twisted. He continued calmly, as if talking about a business merger. "It is a short-term arrangement. You will be compensated generously. 3 months of marriage, public appearances, and then a quiet separation. No strings attached." "Ugh." She shook her head, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "Why me?" He smiled faintly. "Because everyone says I would never do it." Clara stood there, caught between fear and disbelief. The weight of her mother's unpaid medical bills pressed down like a stone. She wanted to walk away, but desperation whispered louder than pride. Lucas placed a contract on the table, his tone sharp and transactional. "Sign this, and you will never have to worry about money again." Clara stared at the papers. Her hands trembled as she read the cold words. Marriage agreement. Duration, 90 days. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "So this is just a bet to you?" Lucas's lips curved into a confident smirk. "Call it an experiment." Outside, thunder rolled through the city, echoing the storm that was about to begin inside both of their lives. Neither of them knew that what started as a cruel dare would soon become the lesson that would break his arrogance and change her life forever. Clara could hardly sleep that night. The rain against her window felt heavier than usual, as if the sky itself was questioning her decision. The contract lay folded on the nightstand beside her, the ink still fresh from where she had hesitated before signing her name. 90 days. 3 months of pretending to be someone's wife for money she desperately needed. It sounded insane, but so did letting her mother's treatment stop because she could not pay. The next morning, a black limousine waited outside her small apartment building in Brooklyn. Neighbors peeked through curtains as she stepped out, clutching her worn purse, still wearing the same old shoes. The driver opened the door without a word. Inside sat Lucas Grant, wearing a dark suit that looked effortlessly expensive. He glanced up from his phone, his expression unreadable. "Good morning, Mrs. Grant," he said coolly. The words hit her like a wave of ice. "Mrs. Grant," it was official now. She swallowed hard, trying not to let her nerves show. "Do I need to call you, Mr. Grant?" He smirked. "Lucas will do, but in public, you will smile, hold my hand, and act like you are madly in love. Think you can manage that?" Clara's jaw tightened. "I will try my best." "Good," he replied, turning back to his phone. "We have a dinner tonight with my board members. My stylist will take care of you this afternoon. Try not to be late." The rest of the ride was silent. Outside the tinted windows, the city rushed past, busy, bright, completely indifferent. When they arrived at the penthouse, Clara stepped into a world she had only seen in magazines. Marble floors reflected soft golden light. A grand piano gleamed in the corner. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and money. A tall woman with a sleek ponytail approached immediately. "You must be Clara," she said briskly. "I am Elise, Mr. Grant's image consultant. We have a lot of work to do." Before Clara could respond, Elise was already circling her, assessing her like a project. "We will start with hair, then wardrobe, then etiquette. You will need to walk like you belong beside a man who owns half of Manhattan." The next hours passed in a blur of makeup brushes, fabric pins, and polite corrections. Clara barely recognized herself in the mirror by the end of it. The woman staring back looked elegant, confident, untouchable, everything she was not. That evening, she found herself stepping out of the limousine once more, this time in front of a glittering hotel where Lucas's company was hosting a private dinner. Cameras flashed. Paparazzi shouted his name. Lucas placed a hand on her back, the contact brief but firm. "Remember what I said," he murmured. "Smile." She did. Her heart pounded as they walked inside, every eye in the room turning toward them. She could feel the whispers travel like ripples through the crowd. "Is that her? The one from the bar? She does not fit him at all." Lucas ignored the comments, greeting investors and shaking hands as if nothing was wrong. Clara stood by his side, her posture perfect, her smile practiced. When one woman sneered, "How lovely of you to take charity cases now," Clara simply replied, "Kindness is the most expensive thing we can afford, is it not?" The woman blinked, embarrassed. Lucas glanced at Clara then, something flickering behind his cool facade. After the dinner, when they were finally alone in the car, he spoke first. "You handled that better than I expected." She looked out the window. "You mean I did not embarrass you?" His lips curved faintly. "Something like that." Silence fell again. But this time, it was different. Less hostile, more curious. Back at the penthouse, Clara thanked him quietly and headed toward the guest room. Lucas watched her disappear down the hall. He should have felt victorious. The bet was going exactly as planned. Yet, for the first time, the game did not feel like winning. Later that night, he poured himself a drink and looked out over the glittering skyline. The city was endless, full of people chasing power, money, pride, just like him. But one woman, a stranger he had chosen on a drunken dare, had stood in a room full of sharks and somehow turned their cruelty into grace. He found himself replaying her words. "Kindness is the most expensive thing we can afford." Lucas took a slow sip, the reflection of city lights glinting in his glass. Something in his chest shifted, faint but real, like the first crack in a wall he had spent years building. In the next room, Clara sat on the edge of her bed, removing her earrings, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The diamonds sparkled under the lamp, but her eyes were tired. She whispered to herself, 90 days, just 90 days. Neither of them knew that those 90 days would test more than just a contract. They would test who they truly were. And by the time the final day came, neither Lucas nor Clara would ever be the same again. The following week passed in a blur of lessons, events, and rehearsed smiles. Clara woke up each morning in a bedroom larger than her entire apartment back in Brooklyn, yet she felt smaller than ever. Every detail of her day was dictated by Elise, Lucas's image consultant, what to wear, how to speak, even how to hold a champagne glass. Lucas, meanwhile, treated their arrangement like a schedule on his calendar. He was polite but distant, his attention divided between phone calls, meetings, and a string of interviews designed to show the world that he had found love. To him, this was still a performance. But for Clara, Every outing felt like a test she could not afford to fail. At a charity luncheon downtown, she accidentally spilled a bit of sparkling water on her silk dress. Whispers rose around her like wind. Before she could apologize, Lucas leaned in and quietly handed her a napkin, covering the stain himself. It was the first time his touch did not feel cold. When their eyes met, his tone softened. "It is fine. Just breathe." Something unspoken lingered between them, but he looked away quickly, adjusting his cufflinks as if nothing had happened. That evening, Lucas hosted a dinner at his penthouse for potential investors. The skyline glowed outside the massive glass walls, and the sound of laughter filled the air. Clara sat beside him, rehearsing her calm expression. One guest, a woman in a glittering silver gown, leaned toward her with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "So, Clara, tell us how you two met," she asked, her tone dripping with curiosity. Clara hesitated. The story Elise had given her was memorized but hollow. "We met by chance, at a fundraiser," she said carefully. The woman laughed. "How romantic. I did not think Lucas went to those unless there were cameras." The table chuckled. Lucas's jaw tightened. But before he could respond, Clara smiled gently. "Sometimes love finds you in the most inconvenient places." The laughter faded. Even Lucas glanced at her with quiet surprise. After the guests left, the penthouse was finally still. Clara gathered empty glasses while Lucas loosened his tie and leaned against the counter, watching her. "You are not bad at this," he said finally. "Pretending?" she asked. He smirked. "Surviving a room full of predators." Clara set the tray down and looked at him. "You think everyone is a predator because that is what you became." The words hung in the air, sharper than either expected. Lucas stared at her, then gave a short laugh that sounded more like a sigh. "You might be right." He poured himself a drink but did not take a sip. For the first time, he seemed human. Not the untouchable CEO on magazine covers, but a man carrying too many ghosts. Clara excused herself and went to her room, but her heart was pounding. She had spoken without fear, and he had listened. Days turned into weeks. The contract clock kept ticking, but something between them began to shift. Lucas started asking about her life, her mother, the little cafe she once dreamed of opening. He found himself walking past her room at night, listening to the faint hum of her favorite old jazz songs. One night, he stopped at her door and knocked softly. "Clara?" She opened it, wearing a simple sweater, her hair loose from its usual styled waves. "I wanted to tell you," he said. "The hospital called. Your mother's treatment has been extended. The bills are handled." Her eyes widened. "You paid them?" He shrugged, pretending it was nothing. "It is part of the deal." But his voice betrayed something warmer than obligation. Clara blinked back tears. "Thank you." "Do not thank me," he said quietly. "You earned it." The silence that followed felt heavier than words. He wanted to reach out, but he stopped himself. She was not part of his world, and yet, lately, she was the only real thing in it. Later that night, Lucas sat in his office, staring at the betting contract his friend had texted him weeks ago. The message at the bottom read, "So, did you win the bet yet?" His hand tightened around the phone. The word bet suddenly felt dirty, childish, cruel. For the first time, he did not want to win. In her room, Clara prayed for the first time in months. Not for money, not for security, but for strength to finish what she had started. She reminded herself that this was still an arrangement, that people like Lucas Grant did not fall in love with women like her. Yet deep down, she felt the truth whispering, dangerous and undeniable. She was already falling for him. And somewhere across the penthouse, under the same roof, the man who once swore he could buy anything in the world was realizing that the one thing he wanted could never be bought. A few mornings later, the sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, soft and golden. Clara stood in front of the mirror, fastening a pair of pearl earrings that Elise had chosen for her. Today was another public appearance, another layer of the act. She told herself it was just part of the deal, but her heart beat faster than usual. Lucas appeared in the doorway, adjusting his cufflinks. "Ready?" She nodded. "Where are we going?" He slipped on his watch. "A weekend retreat with the board. It will be small, formal. They expect Mrs. Grant to charm them." Her stomach twisted. "And if I do not?" "Then I lose more than a bet," he said quietly. They rode together in silence, the city shrinking behind them as the car moved toward the coast. At the private resort, photographers waited near the entrance, flashes exploding as they stepped out. Lucas took her hand without warning, his fingers warm and steady. "Smile, Clara," he murmured. She smiled, and this time, it did not feel forced. Inside the grand hall, business partners and investors mingled, laughing over champagne. Clara tried to keep up with the conversations about stocks, mergers, and luxury markets. When she stumbled over a financial term, one man laughed too loudly. Lucas's voice cut through the noise. "Do not underestimate my wife. She understands more about value than anyone in this room." The laughter died instantly. Clara glanced at him, stunned. He gave a small, reassuring smile before turning away to greet another guest. Later, when the crowd thinned, she found him standing alone on the terrace overlooking the ocean. The wind played with his tie, and for once, he looked unguarded. "You did not have to defend me," she said softly. "Yes, I did." He looked at her then, eyes steady. People forget that class does not define grace. The silence between them stretched. Somewhere below, the waves crashed against the rocks, steady and rhythmic. Clara took a slow breath. "Lucas, why are you really doing this? The bet? The appearances?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Because I thought I needed to prove something. To them. To myself." "And now?" she asked. He looked away, the edge of his confidence melting into uncertainty. "Now I am not sure what I am proving anymore." For the first time, he smiled. Not the practiced grin for cameras, but something real, almost fragile. Clara felt her heart catch. The moment passed as quickly as it came. Voices called from inside, pulling them back to the performance. Lucas offered his arm. "Shall we, Mrs. Grant?" She slipped her hand into his, her pulse unsteady. Under the chandeliers and the watchful eyes of the elite, the billionaire and the waitress-turned-wife moved together with quiet rhythm, two strangers bound by a contract that was starting to feel dangerously real. The following evening, the resort hosted its annual charity gala, a shimmering event where every influential figure from the city gathered to be seen. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, and the air smelled of perfume and expensive champagne. Clara had never been surrounded by so much beauty and cruelty at once. Elise had dressed her in an emerald gown that hugged her figure perfectly. When she stepped into the room beside Lucas, the music softened for a moment, as if the crowd itself paused. Eyes turned. Whispers followed. "Is that her? The one from the bet?" She cleaned up nicely, but let us be honest, she still does not belong here. Clara heard every word, but kept her head high. She smiled politely, even when their eyes mocked her. Lucas noticed. His hand tensed around his glass. "Ignore them," he murmured. "I am fine," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. Then, a familiar voice rose from behind a woman in a silver gown, the same one from the dinner weeks ago. Lucas Grant and his charity project. How inspiring. The laughter that followed was sharp enough to cut through the music. Clara's chest burned, but before she could walk away, a waiter nearby tripped over a cable, sending a tray of wine glasses crashing to the floor. Red liquid splattered across the marble. Without hesitation, Clara knelt to help him. "It is all right," she said kindly, handing him a napkin. "No harm done." The crowd stared. The woman in silver scoffed. "How fitting," she said. "Back to where you belong, cleaning up spills." But before the insult could linger, Lucas's voice carried across the hall. "That is enough." He stepped forward, his tone sharp but calm. "Do you know what makes her different from everyone else here? She remembers what kindness looks like." Silence spread through the room. The woman blushed and turned away. Clara stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at Lucas, unsure whether to thank him or run. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze never left hers. When the orchestra began to play again, Lucas offered his hand. "Dance with me." Her breath caught. "Now?" "Yes, right now." They moved to the center of the floor. The crowd parted instinctively, their judgment replaced by curiosity. Under the golden lights, Clara followed his lead. His hand rested gently at her back, his voice a low whisper near her ear. "Let them talk," he said. "You are the only person here who matters tonight." For the first time since their wedding day, Clara forgot about the contract, the bet, and the ticking clock counting down their 90 days. In that single dance, surrounded by the same people who once laughed at her, she felt seen. And for Lucas, it was the first time the game stopped feeling like a performance. It felt like truth. The days after the gala felt strangely quiet. The tabloids were flooded with pictures of Lucas and Clara dancing beneath the chandeliers, headlines calling them the unexpected couple of the season. For once, the coverage was not mocking. People called her graceful, real, different. But inside the penthouse, Clara kept her distance. Every morning she greeted Lucas politely, served coffee, and went about her duties as if nothing had changed. Yet, something had. The dance still lingered between them, soft, unspoken, and confusing. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Clara found Lucas sitting alone in the living room. The television was off, the room dim except for the city lights spilling in through the glass. He looked up when she entered. "You are avoiding me," he said quietly. "I am not," she replied. "I just did not want to make things awkward." "Awkward?" He gave a short laugh. "You handled a room full of critics better than anyone I know, but you are afraid of talking to me?" Clara hesitated, then crossed the room. That was different. It was pretend. This is real. Her honesty caught him off guard. For the first time, Lucas did not have a clever response. He ran a hand through his hair and looked down. "You are right. I do not even know when I stopped pretending." Silence stretched between them, comfortable and heavy all at once. The city hummed below, the rain painting faint lines on the windows. Clara sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "You built an empire," she said softly, "but you still act like you are fighting ghosts." Lucas's gaze lifted to hers. "Because I am. I grew up thinking love was weakness, that if you cared too much, people would use it against you, so I stopped caring." "Ugh." She studied him, her expression gentle. "Then maybe it is time to start again." Something inside him broke open quietly, painfully. He looked at her, not as the woman from the bet, not as his public image, but as the person who had somehow seen through his walls. Later that night, Clara stood on the balcony, breathing in the cool air. Behind her, she heard soft footsteps. Lucas joined her, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to her without a word. "Thank you," she said, her fingers brushing his for a brief second. They stood side by side, watching the lights shimmer across the city. The silence between them no longer felt empty. After a moment, Lucas spoke again, his voice low. "Do you ever think about what happens when the 90 days are over?" She looked at him carefully. "Every day." He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "So do I." Neither of them said anything more. The contract that had once seemed simple was now the most complicated thing in both of their lives. The line between fake and real was disappearing, one heartbeat at a time. 2 weeks later, the quiet peace they had built began to crack. Lucas had just left for a morning meeting when the first message arrived. Clara was tidying the kitchen when her phone buzzed with a notification from a gossip site. The truth behind Lucas Grant's marriage, a bet gone too far? Her breath caught. The article showed hidden photos from the Horizon Club the night the bet began. It quoted his so-called friends, bragging about how Lucas had agreed to marry the heaviest woman in the room for $100,000. Every cruel word was printed in black and white. Clara's hands trembled as she scrolled. There was even a copy of the contract, her signature visible at the bottom. Her chest tightened. By the time Lucas returned home, she was waiting in the living room, the tablet still glowing on the coffee table. He froze when he saw her expression. "Clara, do not," her voice shook. "Tell me it is not true." He stepped forward, his tone desperate. "It started as a bet, yes, but it stopped being one. I swear to you." "You swore to me the night I signed this," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "You told me it was business, but you made me believe you saw me as a person." "Ugh, Clara, I do." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, you saw a challenge. You saw a headline. I was never real to you." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The distance between them felt infinite. "I cannot be part of this lie anymore," she whispered. "You have all the money in the world, but you have no idea what it means to keep someone's dignity intact." Lucas's throat tightened. "Please, do not leave." "Havdali." She slipped off the ring, placing it gently on the table. "You never lost the bet, Lucas. You just lost me." Then she turned and walked out, leaving him standing in silence. That night, for the first time in his life, Lucas Grant's penthouse felt empty. Not expensive, not powerful, just empty. And as the city lights flickered outside, he realized that his greatest victory had become the one thing he could never win back. Days turned into weeks after Clara left, and Lucas Grant became a ghost in his own empire. His name filled headlines again, but this time with shame. Investors pulled away, sponsors canceled deals, and social media called him a monster. The board demanded a statement, but Lucas refused to spin another lie. He stopped attending meetings, stopped smiling for cameras, and for the first time in years, stopped pretending. Every night, he reread the article that had destroyed everything, not because he wanted to relive the humiliation, but because it reminded him of the truth. He had done this. He had turned something sacred into a wager and broken the only person who had ever looked at him without judgment. One evening, Elise found him sitting in the dark office overlooking the city. "You have to say something, Lucas," she said softly. "A public apology, a press release, something." He looked up, eyes tired. "Words are not enough anymore. If I am going to make this right, I have to show it." That week, he announced a public charity gala under his foundation's name. The theme was Dignity Restored. He invited the same crowd that had mocked Clara months earlier: socialites, investors, the press. Everyone expected another grand performance. When the night came, Lucas walked onto the stage without his usual tailored arrogance. No champagne, no scripted charm, just honesty. "I made a bet," he began, his voice steady but raw. "A bet that turned a woman's kindness into entertainment, and I lost far more than money. I lost someone who reminded me what integrity looks like." The room fell silent. Reporters lowered their cameras. "This event tonight," he continued, "will fund medical care, education, and housing for women who have been shamed or overlooked. It is the least I can do to begin repairing what I broke." Applause did not come right away. People were too stunned. But slowly, hands began to clap, hesitant, then stronger. As Lucas stepped off the stage, he saw her Clara standing near the back of the hall, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, their eyes met. He did not move toward her, did not speak. He simply bowed his head, as if saying the apology words could never hold. And for the first time in his life, Lucas Grant understood that redemption was not about winning, it was about surrender. After the gala, the city could not stop talking. The video of Lucas's confession spread everywhere, his calm, unguarded voice admitting to a bet that turned into regret. Some called it brave, others called it too late, but for the first time, his name was not followed by arrogance. It was followed by something unfamiliar: respect. Clara watched the speech from the crowd that night, her heart caught between pain and forgiveness. She had promised herself never to look back, but when she saw the sincerity in his eyes, she felt the anger inside her soften, just a little. She left before he could find her. Yet, the image of him standing on that stage, humbled and raw, stayed in her mind for days. 2 weeks later, Clara returned to her normal life. She worked part-time at a small bakery, saving money to reopen her cafe dream. The quiet suited her. But one rainy afternoon, as she was wiping the counter, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Still prefer coffee over champagne?" She turned, and there he was, standing by the door. No suit, no entourage, just Lucas. The rain had soaked his shoulders, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked unsure of himself. "Lucas," she said softly. He nodded. "I am not here to ask for forgiveness. I just wanted to see if you are doing all right." Clara crossed her arms. "You did not have to come all this way for that." He gave a faint smile. "You once told me kindness is the most expensive thing we can afford. I figured it was time I started paying for it properly." She could not help but smile. "So, what happened to the great Lucas Grant, the man who never loses?" He met her eyes. He finally learned that love is not a game. It is the only thing worth losing for. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the space between them. Then Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the same ring she had left on his table, cleaned and polished. "I am not asking you to marry me again," he said quietly. "I am asking for a chance to start over without contracts, without lies." Clara looked at the ring, then at him. She could see how much he had changed. The pride, the arrogance, the walls gone. What stood before her was not a billionaire, but a man who had finally learned to be human. She took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "One coffee at a time." He smiled, relief washing over his face. "I can do that." Months later, the city moved on to new headlines. But the story of Lucas and Clara became something different, a quiet reminder that even the coldest hearts can change. Their cafe opened downtown, filled with laughter, music, and the smell of freshly baked bread. Above the counter hung a framed photograph of their first dance at the gala, with a small plaque that read, "Kindness is the most expensive thing we can afford." On Sunday mornings, when sunlight spilled through the windows and Clara poured him coffee, Lucas would look at her and think about how a single bet had brought him to the one thing he never knew he needed: grace. And every time he saw her smile, he knew the truth of it. Love, when it is real, is never a transaction. It is a redemption.